All right, good morning. We'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar this morning, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. I'm very excited to introduce our presenter today. Several years ago, Tracy, our HBCS director, and I were attending a conference in Washington, D.C. We happened to be on a bus and strike up a conversation with a sweet and cheerful couple. We were taking a van on a little sightseeing trip before our conference that morning. And this nice couple happened to be Mr. Greenwood and his beautiful wife, Sue. We found out that Paul was going to be speaking at the conference, and we decided to attend his presentation the following day. Not only was Paul a dynamic and entertaining speaker, but his presentation was full of experience, and it was educational and informative about elder justice issues. And Tracy and I looked at each other and said, we need Mr. Greenwood to come to Utah. Little did we know that Salt Lake County was already working to have him speak at the Elder Abuse Conference that following year in Salt Lake City. So we decided we needed to snatch him up the following year, and he spoke in Southern Utah at the Elder Justice Conference the following year, as well as to our seniors who just found him lovely and entertaining. He then again spoke the next year in Southeastern Utah because he was so popular. So we're so excited. Last month, as we were talking about options to do more outreach and virtual programming in our communities, the idea came up that maybe we could do something about love and about, elder justice and scams. And someone thought of Paul Greenwood, and we thought, wow, let's reach out to Paul. And he graciously accepted. And so now I have the privilege of introducing Mr. Greenwood today. And as our speaker, Mr. Greenwood has been working for 22 years in elder abuse prosecution in the San Diego DA's office. In 1999, he was recognized for his pioneering efforts to pursue justice on behalf of senior citizens. And in March of 2018, Paul retired to concentrate on sharing these lessons that he's learned on elder abuse prosecution with a wider audience. He now spends much of his post-retirement time consulting on elder abuse cases and providing trainings to law enforcement and adult protective services agencies across the country and internationally. So let me welcome Mr. Paul Greenwood, and we'll turn it over to you, Paul. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you, Carrie, for that wonderful, kind introduction. Let me just share my screen with you all. And it's good to have you with us. I just wish my wife and I could be physically with you today in Utah. Utah has become one of my favorite places on earth. I think Zion Canyon just is our favorite national park. And we just love being, okay, thank you. Is there a gray spot on the slide, Tracy?
Yes, there is.
Okay, let me, I had this problem before with Zoom. I'm just going to see if I can get rid of that. 1 second. Let's see, hide video panel. Just 1 second here. Okay, that's better. Well, it's a little better. Yeah, thank you. My wife just came in and showed me what was seeing on the other screen. So I'm so grateful to you all for the Area Agency on Aging, 5 counties, to putting on this important webinar, because education is so key to putting a dent into this escalating crime of romance scams, which is being committed against all ages, but especially against older adults. I don't know whether you saw this, but just 2 days ago, this popped up in the news, and it was this.
Dominique, investigators calling the masterminds of schemes like this predators because they seek out and take advantage of mature women who are on social media just simply looking for companionship. This scheme, we are told, was likely hatched overseas in a foreign country on the other side of the world.
A 65-year-old North Texas woman is out $100,000 after she fell in love with someone who was pretending to be Bruno Mars. Cybercrimes prosecutors say he befriended her on Instagram, convinced her that he was the famous entertainer and that he needed help with his touring expenses. According to court papers, a man identifying himself as Bruno Man promised he was quitting his current tour to be with her.
It will spend months talking to people online, Sometimes they'll even borrow a little bit of money and return it to build up trust. And they're not stupid people, these scammers. They are very much sophisticated con artists.
Authorities say they had help. Basil Amadi and Chinwendu Azuanwu, two men in Houston who opened up the two different bank accounts where she was instructed to send the money to. One check for 10 grand, followed by another for $90,000.
And what these people do is they will recruit people to open up bank accounts. So what you have is you have the people at the bottom opening the bank accounts, people in the middle that are doing the recruiting and communicating with the hackers, and then the hackers.
One of those men went before a judge to hear the allegations against him.
Charged with the third-degree felony of money laundering.
Prosecutors hope the two men cooperate so they can find out more about who recruited them.
Because that's who we're interested in.
The two men could face 2 to 10 years behind bars if they're convicted on those money laundering charges. Now, I did reach out to Bruno Mars on his official Instagram account to see if he's even aware of this case. I have not yet heard back. We're live downtown tonight.
So that's just 2 days ago. That's one victim story out of Texas losing $100,000. And what you're looking at now is a combination of so many types of conduct that often is part of what we call the romance scam. So just a little bit more information about how I became committed to being, like you, so many of you, a fraud fighter. So I was fortunate enough to be part of the San Diego DA's office for 25 years as a prosecutor. And I can honestly tell you that during those 25 years, not one day did I ever wake up thinking, I don't want to be doing this. So why then would I quit 3 years ago from the job that I love more than any other job I've ever had? Well, 25 seemed a good number to leave the office on, 25 years working there. But also this number impacted my decision to leave because I had just turned 66 and I discovered an amazing thing that if you're in full-time employment in America and you turn 66, there's something called Social Security. And when I added in my county pension that I had invested in for 25 years to my Social Security, it seemed to make little sense. But also this number impacted my decision. No, this is not my county pension. This was a number of a headline that I had seen in a newspaper. And this is that headline. Now just take a moment to absorb this. This is huge, isn't it not? And I actually questioned this number from the journalist. I called him up, but he said, oh no, this is real. And he referred me to a report some 3 years earlier, which put the loss at $36.5 billion. And this seemed to mirror what I was experiencing. I was getting calls almost weekly, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, from various jurisdictions all over America. New Hampshire, Connecticut, South Dakota, Texas, Florida. And they were basically saying to me the same thing, Mr. Greenwood, we are seeing a huge spike in the number of reported cases of suspected elder financial exploitation. Is there any chance you can come out for 24 hours to our jurisdiction and help and train our police officers to become more invested in these cases? And I found that by trying to do both, the day job and this other job, it didn't quite work out. It made me a little ragged. So I decided now is the time for me to broaden my horizons and spend my time sharing the information that I've learned in the courtroom with a wider audience. So today is a perfect example of being able to do that without the stress and the worry of having cases to deal with. One other thing, how on earth did a Brit, a former Brit, end up in San Diego? Well, as they say, the best way to tell a story is once upon a time, a young Englishman met a young lady from Southern California. I don't know how he got in the picture, but anyway, he just copied me many years later. So I had the good fortune to be traveling around America in August of 1973, and I came to San Diego for 2 days, and on the Sunday morning, I decided to walk into a Baptist church in part of San Diego. And I went into a young adult Sunday school program, didn't know anybody in the room, and literally the only empty seat was sitting next to this gorgeous young lady, and she became my wife. Her name is Sue, as you heard from Carrie. She's the love of my life, and we've been married for almost 43 years. And I'm just so glad she was with me in Utah to meet, and also on that bus in Washington, D.C. a few years earlier when we met Carrie and Tracy. So I spent 22 years of my 25 years at the DA's office prosecuting crimes committed against older adults. In California, we define a senior as anybody over the age of 65. And interestingly enough, 65% of all the cases that I prosecuted, ranging from murder, neglect, false imprisonment, and of course, financial exploitation, 65% of all the types of cases that I prosecuted involved some kind of theft or fraud. Now, as I mentioned, frauds and scams can pick victims of all ages, from teenagers up to 105 years of age. It's not just older adults, but what we need to remember is that unfortunately, older adults are particularly susceptible to these crimes. And why is that? It's partly generational. Sometimes it's to do with the cultural background from which we come. Partly it's due to circumstances such as pandemic. You know, and I know that this pandemic that we've all been battling with has been a perfect gift for every predator scammer out there. It literally fell into their laps last February, and they're not letting up. They are using this isolation that we're all experiencing. They're using this exposure to the internet that many of us are part of, including today, and they're using technology advances to scam their way into our hearts and our lives. The information that I want to share with you today is not just for victims who've already been victimized, and I would suggest that today there are people on this call, probably on YouTube Live, who are already victims. I would venture to suggest that there are some people listening and watching who are victims and yet deny that they are victims. And they are trying to justify what they have done. Again, this seminar is not just for potential victims, victims who are potentially there and liable to becoming a victim. It's for family members who care about an older loved one. It's for professionals right now today who work in banks, who work in credit unions, and who work in convenience stores. So for family members, it's important that they understand how this scam works so they can recognize red flags that occur in their older family member's life. And for financial institutions, it's important to look out for any departure from the regular banking habits of their customer or member. Today, for example, a person could be walking into the financial institution and asking to withdraw $10,000 in cash. They've never done that before. That should be a red flag for the teller to ask the customer or the member to come into a private office and sit down and be curious and ask questions. Sadly, not enough institutions train their staff to do that. They simply are trained, if that's what the customer wants, I give it to them without any thought of probing. And what about convenience stores? Why them? Why Walmart, Walgreens, CVS? Because that's where the scammers will direct the victim to go after they withdraw their cash from their institution and purchase what? Gift cards, Target cards, money packs, iTunes gift cards, because that is the method that so many scammers like to use because it provides another layer, they hope, of anonymity. But thankfully, law enforcement is becoming more skillful in tracking even where these gift cards end up. So it is important that we educate ourselves about how victims get exploited. How prevalent is this a romance scam right now? Well, if you turn to the United States Senate Committee on Aging, which I had the privilege of testifying in front of 3 times during my 25 years at the DA's office, it appears as one of their top 10 scams. In fact, it's number 4 on their list, only preceded by sweepstakes, robocalls, and Social Security impersonation. And according to AARP, it's the costliest scam right now. Now, I think the number that you see there, $83.7 million, is a little underestimated. But there it is at the very top of the costliest scams. What about in Canada? Again, it's at the very top, $18.5 million losses in 2020. And again, that could be conservative, because here's the problem. Not every victim comes forward. Not every victim identifies themselves. Too many victims of the romance scam are embarrassed and they absorb the loss without telling anybody. And that's the worst thing that they can do. So we call it the romance scam, or we call it the sweetheart scam. And I just want to break it down for you, because I've seen in my career as a prosecutor 2 types of romance scam. You know, there's a good saying, guard your wallet as well as your heart. So these are 2 major types of scam. The first one is what I call the face-to-face con artist. And this happens pretty much somewhere in America every day. What do I mean by that? The scammer, the predator, is out there looking for the perfect victim. Now, in the last 12, 15 months, maybe it's declined a little because we're not out there as much as we used to be, but it's going to resurface when we become more comfortable with going out and about. So who are these people who are out there looking for a victim in the big wide world? Well, sometimes they are professional predators, and they are actually meeting their victims as clients through a legitimate business transaction. Here is an example of one. Samantha Pham, who was arrested and jailed for tricking an elderly man out of $200,000, out of a Lexus, and out of his home. And what did she do with the money? Well, this is Northern California. She went to Nevada and gambled most of the money away. So that's a classic example of what I'm talking about. And I saw many examples of these face-to-face scammers who pretended to be affectionate, who pretended to be interested in forming a relationship, but ultimately all they were interested in was the victim's money. So they meet through a legitimate disguise of a business transaction, or secondly, through a chance encounter. So where do these chance encounters occur? In these places. Parking lots. I tell you where some of the cases I prosecuted started. They started in the parking lot of Walmart. Why Walmart? Have you ever met a senior citizen who does not know where their Walmart is? Everybody loves to go to Walmart. And these predators used to troll around the Walmart parking lot looking for their perfect victim driving up in a Buick. And they would seize the opportunity for a chance meeting. Places of faith, unfortunately, you may feel very safe and connected in a place of faith, but unfortunately, there are people who join places of worship for one reason only, to look for a potential victim. What about door to door? In one of my cases, a female was knocking on different doors and she was using the ruse, "I've lost my cat. Have you seen my cat?" She found an elderly man who answered his door. She found out that he lived alone. She asked if she could come in and have a cup of tea. And that's where she developed this, quote, quasi-romantic relationship with him, but all the time focusing in on what she could steal from him. Older people love the casino in many cases, but then you're going to get the people walking around the floor looking for the perfect lonely person with whom they can strike up a casual conversation. Or it's in the grocery store, in the vegetable aisle. They will come across an older person and strike up a conversation, and that's where the relationship starts. So what is the hook in this face-to-face meeting relationship? It's called charm. You know, in none of these cases did the perpetrator ever put a gun in the face of the victim, stick a knife into their stomach and say, "Hand over the money." No, they used flowers, they used chocolates, they used all kinds of charm to convince the victim that the predator was interested in them on a romantic level. And the con knows exactly where to find these victims and how to target the vulnerability of the victim, because it's people like this, living alone, staring out of the window, who may be thinking of looking for love. And along comes this person. You know, one of the cases, my suspect was knocking on doors, and she used the ruse, I can be a caregiver. Do you need any help? This elderly gentleman opened the door and said, "You are an answer to prayer. My wife is terminally ill." Literally, he allowed her to come in, no background check. She took, quote, care of the terminally ill wife until she died. Within 5 days of the wife's death, the caregiver took the elderly man in her car, drove him to Vegas, and married him, and then proceeded over the next 3 months to change his living trust bit by bit to give her and her family pretty much all the assets and deprive his existing family of anything. The victim, you'll find, is often recovering from a loss, a bereavement, maybe a relationship which has ended in a divorce. And this victim appreciates the attention, and of course, the victim has the money. But even if money is not the motive, using a dating service has its perils. And some people go to a faith-based dating website in the belief that it's safe because only good, honest, quote, Christian people will go to that website. Oh no. Can you watch? This is from San Diego.
And potentially a sociopath.
Harsh words from prosecutor David Williams III as he reacted to the conviction of 38-year-old Sean Banks.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Sean Patrick Banks, guilty of the crime of rape of an intoxicated woman.
The former Navy lieutenant showed little emotion inside the El Cajon courtroom as jurors found him guilty. Guilty on 5 counts of forcible rape, rape of an unconscious person, and burglary stemming from 2 separate incidents. He was found not guilty of trying to dissuade a witness.
Sean Banks would spend weeks, if not months, grooming these victims, making them believe that he was an honest, trustworthy, and Christian man.
One victim testified that the two met on Christian Mingle, where they talked about God, faith, and the Bible. Back in 2012, they decided to meet at her La Mesa apartment to watch a movie.
So a big warning. Just because you go onto something like Christian Mingle doesn't mean you're going to meet the right person. Now, the second type of scammer is the one that we think of for the romance scam because it involves the internet. And it's sometimes referred to as catfishing. And where did it get that name from? Well, it originated from a 2010 movie that developed this theme of stolen identities, very much like the one about which you heard this morning as I began with Bruno Mars. And then there was a spin-off program on MTV by the same name called Catfish. So the definition is this. A catfish is a person who's creating a fake profile on social media using a stolen photo, false biography to pretend to be someone other than themselves, used to trick an unsuspecting victim into falling in love with them. So who are these people? Well, some of them, would you believe, are actually still in prison. And you would be shocked at how easy it is in America today to smuggle a cell phone into a prison cell. So what better way to use their time when they're locked up for 23 hours a day in a little cell than to operate a scam, a romance scam, using an active cell phone. Or they could be operating from overseas. Many of these suspects, for whatever reason, originate in West Africa, some from Ghana, some from Nigeria. And of course, because they're overseas, it's going to be very, very difficult to track them and apprehend them and then extradite them back to the United States. But there is some success. Here's an example of one from Virginia, a Ghanaian man who's now been brought back to the United States, accused of swindling one victim out of more than $300,000 on the romance scam. And on the course of this relationship, the victim sent him a laptop, a watch, clothes, sneakers, cash, totaling in effect $312,000. His excuse was he needed $200,000 to buy gold for his business. Here's another one out of Maryland, where two people from Gaithersburg, Maryland, were arrested for being part of a romance scheme. And another one from Missouri, yet another Ghana native indicted for a $5 million romance fraud scheme. This guy out of the UK blackmailed over 550 women after suggesting a romance with these people on Snapchat. And then unfortunately, he would entice them to send very personal photographs of themselves, compromising photographs in many cases. And then he would threaten them by saying, I can share this photo with your family and you'll be embarrassed, so give me money. Here's another one out of Oklahoma. A defendant pleads guilty for his role in a Nigerian romance scam that impacted victims in the United States. Another one out of Georgia. It's happening, and the good thing is that more and more United States attorneys' offices are handling these types of cases and getting success from it. But the fact is that this is still the tip of the iceberg. Too many cases are either going unreported or untraceable. So let's break down the scam and see how does it actually work in practice. This is a very good overview of the romance scam.
Looking for love in all the right places? Like popular dating sites, mobile apps, and social networking sites? Ron seems like a perfect match for you. He's thoughtful and says he can't live without you. He says he's from the US but works out of the country. He says he wants to visit but says he can't afford it. He asks you to send him money. Last month it was medical bills for his sick aunt. This month he needs money to fix his car. Next month, who knows? Ron wants your money. Don't send it. The person pretending to be Ron is a scammer. He'll tell you anything to get you to wire cash right away. He'll never run out of excuses. If an online love interest asks you for money, walk away, no matter how compelling the story. Report scams at ftc.gov/imposters.
Sorry about my landline ringing there during the playing of that video. It was a scammer and I just unhooked the phone. So the online scammer trolling the internet right now looking for his or her next victim. And what they do is they steal somebody else's identity to create this fake profile. That's the blunt truth. And that's why it is so dangerous to go on any website, dating website, because you really do not know who you're dealing with unless you are able to see them face to face on Zoom or Skype or FaceTime.
Interesting. More than 1/3 of all couples now meet online, many of them on dating websites. Yeah.
Unfortunately, those dating sites are also prime ground for scammers looking to prey on broken-hearted folks out there. Well, consumer reporter John Matarese is on your side with a warning everyone using these sites needs to hear.
If you're single and looking for a partner or recently divorced, an online dating site can be the answer to your prayers. But these cyber dating sites come with a real risk. One Warren County woman recently shared her story to warn others.
She's a 9-to-5 office worker. He was a handsome U.S. serviceman, and it looked as though it could blossom into the romance of her life.
He told me he was from New York and that he was stationed in Kabul right now, and he had a almost 16-year-old son and was looking for the love of his life because his wife had passed away several years ago.
Kathy, who asked that we not use her last name, found James, a strapping 50-something sergeant on a dating site.
I received an email that said, "Hey, you look interesting, I want to meet you."
Soon, she says, their conversations over books and wine turned into declarations of love. His messages saying, "I pledge my heart and all my love."
I was the love of his life, and he knew that God had sent me into his life for a reason.
So that's a classic red flag story. And here's another one. This is from a victim who went onto a site called Christian Helping Hands. She met this person on the website. He started to text her, and he said he was a missionary and he needed money for business, health, and a return flight home. Very similar to so many other stories. Thankfully, she only lost $3,500, but $3,500 is still a huge impact. But it also has an emotional toll on the victim. My heart is broken. And she says this, "I do not understand how someone could do this." Unfortunately, that is the reaction of somebody who's unfortunately not had too much experience in the real world, that there are so many people out there who are on the take. And we have to understand that whenever we talk to a stranger, somebody we've never met before, there is always that possibility that they have got intentions that are going to harm us rather than help us. Here's somebody else.
I look at it now and I think, how could I be so naive?
This woman is still healing after losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in a scam and has asked us not to use her name. The 79-year-old ballroom dance executive says it happened after she decided to use an online dating service.
He was calling all the time. Almost every day he would call to see how I was. He also realized how musical I was or am and that I enjoyed dancing. So he would send a lot of music videos.
They decided to meet, but the man who said he was a general contractor abruptly needed to go to Malaysia for work. At one point, he said he needed money for a construction license.
The answers were always legitimate in my mind, and so I sent him the first $9,000.
Over several weeks, she sent more money. In all, more than $400,000. When he asked her for a ticket to travel to the U.S., something didn't seem right. So she called authorities in Malaysia.
I'd even called the embassy and they just said, "You've been scammed, you'll never get your money."
Turns out the man she was talking to on the phone used someone else's picture and name for his profile.
For me, I thought that I was really doing well to do the background check. So obviously, these people steal identities.
Postal inspectors say the most important red flag is money.
If they're asking you for money ever, especially large dollar amounts, that it's probably a scam.
She wants to tell her story to keep others from becoming victims.
You have to be able to share it in order to live with it, because it will consume you, and it did for a long time.
And you know what strikes me about this lady? She's clearly articulate, She's very intelligent. I would not say she's naive. Certainly you would never use the word silly or stupid with this victim. She was the victim of a very, very experienced, professional, clever scammer. And that's what we have to understand with this scam, that these guys, primarily fellas, are very, very good at knowing how to get to the heart. Because once you get to the heart will control the logic and the general other experience of life. And you'll see the red flags here that he spent hours on the phone with her. He was grooming her and focusing on her interests. Here's another one.
This is him down here.
Judy Vaughn just isn't ready to delete these photos from her cell phone. She's saved every message.
James, I will always love you.
Since James Hackett met her online 3 years ago.
We would talk every day, half the night. He was always there to talk to me.
Kind words, even love songs that Vaughn admits filled a hole left by the death of her husband of 38 years. The two exchanged intimate details about their lives as this Anderson grandmother on disability learned Hackett was divorced and serving overseas. Vaughn says about a year into their online relationship, he told her he wanted to start a life with her if only she could pay for his leave. $4,500.
My daughter-in-law looked him up on the computer, and it come up that he was a scammer. That was right at the beginning, and I didn't believe her.
What do you think of that now in hindsight?
I don't know whether you heard that last bit. Her daughter showed her mother that this was a scammer by looking up his photo. I did not believe her, said the mother. And she still has kept the text on her phone from this guy because she doesn't want to accept fully that he doesn't exist. So there are so many consistent red flags, which I just want to re-emphasize now. Number one, this scammer will use somebody else's identity. Typically, they will gravitate towards military background, because who doesn't like somebody in uniform who used to be in uniform? They're patriotic. They've served their country. It also gives them the context by which they can say that I'm going to be overseas, or I'm not allowed to use the secure internet for Skype or FaceTime. Or they'll be coming from an impressive professional career, such as an architect, an engineer, medical person, whatever. Once they found their victim, they will lure the victim to leave the dating website because they don't want the website to be monitoring the communications between victim and scammer. And so they will ask them for their number, they will start texting them or using another communication like WhatsApp. And they will never, ever agree to use FaceTime, Skype, or Zoom in the real time. And why, as you all know, if they were to do that, the victim would say, hey, you don't look like the person who posted that photo on the website. Of course not. So they'll never, ever do that. And they'll always have, in the words of that last victim, a legitimate excuse why they can't get on FaceTime or Skype or Zoom. But that is a huge red flag. But then, as the relationship grows over the internet, the scammer will suggest plans to meet up in the future, something for the victim to be excited about, to be looking ahead to. And the scammer will make all kinds of promises and how wonderful it's all going to be when they finally meet at sunset. But then suddenly, those plans are dashed because of an unforeseen event. Maybe he's called out for military duty somewhere else. Maybe a disaster befalls him. Maybe a medical emergency has occurred. Maybe he's the victim of a robbery. But something happens. And as a result, he needs you to send money. And why you? Because you're the only person he can trust. You are the love of his life, and after you send the money, everything is going to be fine, and I'll eventually get back, and we will resume those plans that we have to spend the rest of our life together. You know, in that first example I gave you with Bruno Mars, the victim was convinced by this scammer that he, quote, Bruno Mars, needed money for his tour, as if Bruno needs any more money.
Last year, our sister station in Minnesota followed a group of women to Texas as their scammer faced a judge. The man was posing as a military war hero online, and then he left a trail of victims all across the United States, conning them out of thousands of dollars. He was sentenced to 24 years in prison. He got the maximum sentence.
Justice. We were asking to protect women from him. Finally, justice. We were all heard.
So these were all victims of the same romance scammer. And you can tell they felt at least that some justice had been served. So he left, as it said, a trail of victims. Here's a warning, though, because some victims, and I've talked to some of these victims, they get involved in a criminal enterprise, often unknowingly. But sometimes there is a financial advantage for themselves because they become what I call the conduit for the scammer to communicate and pass on money to the victim, who can then in turn pass it on to somebody else. Because that's what the scammer wants you to do, because then it creates another barrier between himself and the tracing of the money back to him. And if a victim starts passing on money, they are potentially at risk of being charged with money laundering themselves. And I've spoken to several older victims of the scam who were at great danger of becoming money mules. So there are different things online that you can educate yourselves about how the money mule scam works. But again, it's a warning to any potential victim that if you start receiving money and then being asked to pass it on, you could end up being indicted. So what should you look for? If you believe that a family member is a victim or a friend, what do you look for? What kind of red flags? Number one, you look for any changes in their behavior. For example, they might be telling you about a new friend that they've met, that they're very excited about. Maybe they seem to be spending much more time on the phone or on the internet. Maybe they're making irregular trips to the bank or the credit union to withdraw cash. Maybe they're going to CVS or Walgreens to purchase those gift cards. So these are things that we need to be focusing in on. These are all indicators that they've already been sucked into this scam. Or because they have given all this money to the suspect, they themselves are now facing financial problems. They may come to you and ask if they can borrow $400 this month in order to pay the utility bill. So what should you do if, as you are watching on YouTube Live, if you're already a victim and you've actually sent money to the scammer? The worst thing you can do is to stay silent. This is a poster that we developed for San Diego. This number wouldn't operate probably in your jurisdiction, but that the message is clear. Silence is not golden. We need you to come forward and be willing to tell your story. You've got to overcome any feelings of shame, any feelings of embarrassment. And sometimes it's actually liberating to be able to talk to a family member or a trusted friend, but don't delay, because you should also, particularly if you have recently wired money or transferred money through prepaid gift cards, you should immediately contact the financial institution or the store where you purchased the gift cards, because there is an outside chance, and this is only if you've done it in the last 48, 72 hours probably, there is an outside chance that, number one, the gift cards that you've sent or the numbers you've given out haven't been used yet. Or secondly, if the money is going through a transfer, that there may have been a held up with the money, maybe in New York somewhere, and there's a possibility that the bank could actually claim back the money for you. Secondly, you should contact your local law enforcement agency and tell them that you want a report to be taken. But I have to warn you, be prepared for a refusal by the law enforcement agency to take that report. I know this to be a fact because I've heard about it. I've seen it myself as a prosecutor, that police agencies sometimes are very reluctant to take such a report. They may tell you this: there's no point because we won't be able to identify the suspect. He's probably overseas. There's nothing we can do. Or sometimes, and this happens, the police officer may tell you, well, nobody was holding a gun to your head. You gave the money voluntarily, so there's no crime here. Or they may tell you, the crime didn't occur here. We don't have the jurisdiction to even take a report. All those three responses are factually and legally incorrect. And the part of the problem is that police officers are not lawyers, and they don't understand how the laws of criminal jurisdictions work. So insist that a report be taken. And if they still refuse to take a report, write a letter to the chief of that law enforcement agency. Why am I insistent that a report be taken? Because ultimately, as this scam increases, and it will, we are going to need more funding for adult protective services, for law enforcement, for prosecutors. And the only way we're going to get proper funding is if we show our legislature the data. And what I mean by data is the number of police reports that have been collected, which increase year by year. And if a police agency refuses to take a report, then we're going to lose valuable data. In addition, you should think about calling the FBI. And this is who you call. You call the Internet Crime Complaint Center. It's called IC3. You can file a complaint online. And this is their website. It's very simple, ic3.gov. And once you get to that website, you can download a form and fill it out and then send it in. Very important for you to do that. In addition, you should contact the Federal Trade Commission. Again, here is their website, ftc.gov. Why? Well, this explains.
This is you. You've been ripped off, or you've spotted a scam. Don't keep it to yourself. Take it to the Federal Trade Commission by filing a complaint. What kind of complaint? The Federal Trade Commission is the nation's consumer protection agency. So if a business doesn't deliver on its promises, or if someone cheats you out of your money, the Federal Trade Commission wants to hear about it.
I bought a phone card with 350 minutes of calling time, but it cut me off after 20.
I'm getting bills for things I didn't buy. I think someone stole my identity.
Letter said I won a sweepstakes, but I had to wire money to cover the taxes. I did, and never heard from them again.
I responded to an ad online for a free trial offer, but then I started seeing charges for it every month.
I thought the email was from someone who saw my resume and wanted to hire me, but they asked for my bank account number. I reported it to the Federal Trade Commission.
Telling the Federal Trade Commission helps us stop rip-offs, scams, and fraudsters. Your complaints matter here. To file a complaint, just go to ftc.gov/complaint and answer the questions. Or call 1-877-FTC-HELP. That's all there is to it. If you've been ripped off or scammed, complain to the Federal Trade Commission. It can help put the bad guys out of business.
Now, the Federal Trade Commission is not a criminal investigative agency. But why it's important to also file a complaint with them is that they have a huge database, and they can then cross-report to other federal agencies such as the FBI. And sometimes by sharing this database information, the dots connect. And I've seen that happen where we have a case in San Diego with one victim and one suspect, but we float that name to the feds. They then connect it to other victims and other defendants. So it's so worth making that complaint. In addition, if as part of the scam you received a letter through the mail, then contact the US Postal Inspectors at uspis.gov. I've worked with the United States Postal Inspectors. They are very, very good, and they will do a thorough investigation if it involves something that came through the mail as part of the romance scam. And they are a federal agency, and they will work as well with the FBI and with the United States Attorney's Office. So in summary, before I hopefully take some questions, I hope you have been thinking of questions, and please put those questions in the question chat box, and then we'll hopefully have time to answer some of these. But in summary, this is what we need to do. We need to be alert and vigilant at all times. And I know it goes against the grain, but we have got to become more skeptical. Not cynical, but skeptical. You hear about something on a phone call, through the internet, through an email. It sounds, or the person sounds too good to be true. And he or she probably is. Let's be skeptical. Let's be cautious. But also be inquisitive. Ask lots of questions. And when you don't get the right answers, and when you get the runaround, and when you get the excuses, that's when you know to stop this communication in its tracks before the person asks you for money. Don't let your heart drive you into this cul-de-sac of fraud. Please. And even though it's said a lot, it doesn't mind to repeat it. Do not send money to somebody that you've never, ever met in your life. In a previous video, one of the postal inspectors said, when you're asked for money, it probably is a scam. I would leave out the word probably. It is a scam. I would not hesitate to say that if you've not met somebody online and they're asking you for money, it is a scam. I just want to finish before I take some questions with this short piece from the United Kingdom about two ladies who were victims.
Thanks, honey. I really appreciate your love and effort.
This voicemail message sounds heartfelt, but nothing about it is real.
I'll talk to you in the morning. Good night. I love you and love you so much. Good night, girl.
The man who spoke of love said he was 49 and lived in South Africa. Penny Ward met him online on the dating app Tinder.
He just seemed so nice, and we just started chatting, and he was based in Liverpool. He'd been there for 12 years, but at the moment he was in South Africa on a great farm that he just bought. But he was due back at the end of March. So he just said, should we chat on WhatsApp if you want to meet up when I come home?
The couple started speaking on the phone. They exchanged hundreds of messages a day, but they never talked over video. Within 2 months, they spoke of love, and he asked for money.
He sent me an email to say that all his machinery was in customs and he needed £26,000 to get it out. But just by that point, I didn't want to lose him. So I think I was just willing to say anything to him to keep him.
Penny sent about £500, but soon she realised she was being scammed. As she tried to discover who this man really was, she met a woman we're calling Elizabeth. It turned out at the same time he was using the same photos, same story, but different name to scam her too.
We met on Tinder and he was just so lovely. And then before you know it, you're sort of addicted to being cared for in a way that I hadn't been before.
The man told Elizabeth he loved her and they planned she'd move to South Africa. But then came the appeal for money for his farm.
I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. It's 210,000 rand now. Without that, then they're going to release my registration. I don't know what to do.
Elizabeth sent £30,000. It was all her savings.
Once he realised I didn't have any more money, his messages stopped, and you just feel like such an idiot. The story, the photos, all just lies. And afterwards, everything seems too obvious. I haven't even gone to the police. I'm so ashamed. And what's the point? I'm never going to get my money back, and he's never going to get caught. I'm too ashamed to tell anyone I know. I'm borderline now, whether I lose my house or not.
Tinder, where the women met this scammer, told us we are saddened to hear of anyone who has fallen victim to a romance scam when seeking a real connection. We have a zero-tolerance policy on this type of behaviour and are constantly monitoring our platform to detect and remove any suspicious profiles. We encourage our members to look for the blue tick, which indicates that the member's profile image is genuine and has been verified by Tinder through our photo verification programme. But exclusive figures shown to us by Action Fraud show thousands of people are being duped every year.
Reports of online romance fraud have gone up over the past 12 months, and you'd expect that because of the pandemic. People are at home, isolated and more vulnerable, and victims in total lost a staggering £63 million. And remember, those are just the cases we know about.
So how can you date safely?
I think the let's get off here and go and chat somewhere private is a real red flag. It seems perfectly natural in a conversation, so you have to recognise that. But, you know, that's, the dating services have messaging platforms which are monitored, which are checked. I think the other is things just becoming not real. People who are instantly in love with you can't keep away from you.
Penny and Elizabeth both admit they were lonely and vulnerable, but they hope by sharing their stories, others looking for love might avoid fraud. Katerina Vitozzi, Sky News.
So I'm just going to close here with my contact information. I do that if you have a situation where you're concerned about a relative, a loved one, a neighbor, if you believe they are already a victim, and if you also believe that law enforcement is not taking it seriously enough, you can certainly email me. But I only ask that you keep your email short and to the point with the basic facts. But with that, I'm going to hand back now to Tracy and see if we have any questions that I'll be more than happy to answer. Tracy.
Thank you. Right now in our chat, I'm not able to bring up the ones on YouTube. Christine, are you able to bring on the YouTube chat if there's any questions?
I am monitoring that, so if anybody has questions, please go ahead and chat them now, and we will read them out and have Mr. Greenwood answer them.
I want to ask, and this is kind of a funny question, have you ever met Neve from Catfish?
Have I met who?
Neve from Catfish.
No, I haven't. Who is that? I've never actually seen the program myself. But I can tell you one thing. I have been mistaken for Bryan Cranston many, many times. So maybe I should have an alternative ego personality for Bryan Cranston.
I know I wrote down several of the .govs that you sent us, so the IC3. When responding, do they respond quickly or does it take some time? Do you know what their response is like?
I don't know what their current turnaround time is. You'll probably get an automated response as soon as you submit your complaint. And I also imagine that because of the pandemic, they are swamped with complaints. And that's why I'm suggesting that you do more than just to FBI, that you you make a complaint with your local police department as well. And if, again, you got a letter, do something with the US Postal Service. And at the same time, file a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission, because by doing it to several agencies, I'm hoping that you will at least get the attention of one or more of them quicker.
Let's see, Maria and I have noticed that on our Facebook pages, we're getting several gentlemen from other countries sending us messages just out of the blue. I'm not single, but Maria is. But we've noticed we've had people from all over the world, and sometimes we're getting the same people.
Yeah.
So it's kind of.
And unfortunately, my mother-in-law, who's 91, who's on Facebook, she's getting the same kind of messages. And that's one of the reasons why my wife and I have never, ever been on Facebook. I like to think of Facebook, unfortunately, as fake book, because there's too much fake stuff out there on social media. I limit myself to Twitter and LinkedIn, which I find to be educational. But I think people who are on Facebook need to be very, very cautious.
Paul, this is Carrie. What do you think would be the top things that we as professionals can do to help our seniors or those that we serve?
Thank you. I think number one is what we're doing today is continue the outreach, continue the education. Whenever we're talking to older adults, we should be talking about the potential for scams, asking questions. Have you been contacted? Are you currently involved in an online relationship? I think we need to reach out to banks and credit unions and offer to do far more education outreach for there. Because ultimately, if the banks and the credit unions are on board with us, then we can stop the cash leaving the account of the victim. You know, one of the things that troubled me about the Bruno Mars story that I played at the beginning, she lost $100,000. The bank were complicit in allowing this money to be transferred. You know, I got to believe that that bank should have sat her down and asked her specific questions. Have you recently been online? Have you recently formed a relationship? Because this is the only way that we're going to be able to stop this money from getting into the hands of the scammers. And when we talk to people who are victims, we need to reassure them that we don't use words like naive or stupid or silly or crazy. Victims will feel that, but we need to affirm that they're not being, quote, silly or stupid, but these scammers are very skillful at what they do, that the victims are not alone, and we need to embolden them to be willing to come forward and share the information with the appropriate authorities.
Thank you.
On that note, we have a question that kind of goes along with it that came through our YouTube, and it says, do we have any tips on how to initiate a conversation with someone who you fear is being victimized through a scam?
Great question. And I think you have to avoid any judgmental language or words, be very non-confrontational, but at the same time, be inquisitive. And maybe the opportunity will come as they maybe tell you about this person that they've met through a website. And you can just very gently probe. Tell me, what do you know about them? Have they sent you a photo? Oh, I'd love to see the photo. Maybe you can then say, have you thought about doing a reverse search on Google with this photo, just to make sure that this person is authentic? Oh, by the way, have you ever arranged to meet on FaceTime or Zoom? Oh, well, why didn't you do that? That would be fun. But then if they say, well, I tried, but they can't do it because of this, this, or this, that's when I think you need to say, you know what? I'm afraid to let you down on this, but that's a crook, that's a scammer. And then refer them to things that you can draw online that I've played. I mean, it's very easy to go online and find all these kinds of excerpts of real victims who talk about their story, and then play that to the person, and then just remind them, you know what, if they ask you for money, you know that they are a scammer. So those are the kinds of things that I think would break the ice and start that conversation going. Again, not being judgmental or critical of how could you have done that, no, but be inquisitive.
Thank you. Our viewer said that that was helpful and answered her question.
Great.
We have another question that's just come in, if you'd like to take another one.
Sure.
Okay, it says here that seniors have been given invitation cards to health seminars and went to one of them and were talked out of $6,000 for a belt that was supposed to help them lose weight and an eating plan. Is this something that you see, and how should this be addressed?
Yes. Unfortunately, it's one of various types. Now, this may not be an out-and-out fraud in the sense that maybe they did get something in return for their money, but probably what they got was a belt that doesn't work. And it was probably manufactured somewhere for under $100. And in return, you're getting something that you've paid $6,000 for. What I think you need to do, absolutely, that should be reported to the Federal Trade Commission. I think you should also contact your local Better Business Bureau, and I would contact the place where the seminar was organized so that they are aware of your dissatisfaction. And if you feel comfortable, and I would certainly want to do this if this pans out, is make a police report and say, I believe that I got ripped off. I'm a victim of theft. And try to get your police department to initiate a criminal investigation. If they refuse to do that, try your state attorney general's office, who typically will have a consumer protection division that is designed to help consumers who are victims of these kinds of scams and frauds.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions come through right now, just a lot of thank yous, and this has been excellent. We did receive another comment from our caregiver support program lead here in the state of Utah that says, this has been very helpful and thank you. She now feels that she'll be informed as she creates materials for the program, and she'll definitely be including financial fraud websites that you've shared with us today. So
well, that's encouraging. And that's exactly the reason why I'm in this, to try to help spread the word. And I'm hoping that we can leave people with a positive message, not a negative one, but we all need to be aware and be responsible citizens and keep a lookout for people who may be at the risk of losing hard-earned savings.
Paul, we'd like to thank you for coming on with us today. We appreciate everything you've done for us, especially this month. We have a wonderful blog for him on our webpage. And so if you'd like to read his blog, it is posted in there for everyone to read. So on behalf of the Area Agency on Aging at 5 County, thank you. We really appreciate your time today. We'd also like to have you all tune into our social media on March 9th, because we'll have an exciting announcement that day. And thank you so much.
And here's my wife to say hi.
Hi, I wanted to say hi, girls.
Hi, Sue.
Hi, Sue. It's good to see you.
Happy Friday.
Happy Valentine's weekend.
Yes, you guys too. I hope you celebrate and have a joyous weekend.
We will. All isolated here. Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Well, hopefully we'll see you in person sometime. We'd love to come back to Utah.
Definitely. And yeah, I think we'll be reaching out to you again, maybe for some other things. We're just setting up an MDT, a local MDT here in Southern Utah. So we may, ask for some support from you and reach out to you.
I'd love to do that, Carrie.
Thank
Okay,
you.
cool.
Thank
All right. Have a good weekend, everybody.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well done.